Hey pole dancer, welcome to the Evidence-Based Pole Podcast. My name is Rosie Boa. I'm a pole dancer, pole teacher, and personal trainer. And I've started this podcast so that we can learn together, talk with the experts, read the research, and feel better on and off the pole. So if that sounds like something you're interested in doing, let's go. Hello friends, I'm just popping in here at the beginning because both Rachel and I completely forgot to mention it. We were so excited to be talking about movement and exercise science, but we're actually hosting a workshop together. So it's going to be, if you're listening to this when it comes out, Tuesday, April 25th, 2023 at 5 to 6:30 p.m. Eastern. That is 2 to 3:30 p.m. Pacific. It is online. There's going to be a recording available if you can't make it live, and we are focusing on the spine. So finding easy, flowy movement that feels good. I'm really looking forward to teaching it, honestly, because I know, it's going to feel so good. It's going to be so nice after, sitting around editing podcasts all day. That's not the only thing I do. So if you're interested, I'll put the link in the show notes. Tickets are on Eventbrite, and we would love to have you either live or in the recording. So with that out of the way, let's hop into the episode. Rachel, you're a personal trainer as well.
Yes.
And I know that you actually have more of an exercise science background than I do, because you actually have your undergrad is in that. So do you want to talk a little bit about what is exercise science as a field? Because I think for, if you're very athletic and, you grew up super athletic, maybe it's something like, of course, exercise science is a field, but certainly not something that I knew about until I was an adult. So what is it? What sorts of things can we learn from it? And then we'll hop into some specifics I think are super relevant to pole dancers and folks don't always get introduced to. So take it away.
No, that's a great question. And exercise science is a relatively new field in terms of the sciences. I did not know that my university offered it. I thought I was going to go in and study biology and hope that there was an anatomy and physiology course that I could take. And so, my school was pretty small, just 2,000 students. So the fact that we had an exercise science program, I was so excited about it. And it's not just the study of exercise, right? I think that's a big misconception. Right now, I think they even changed the degree name. So now it's kinesiology, but it's all kind of within the same umbrella of just kind of studying of the human body and movement. And so we did have, sports specific classes we did talk about like actual exercise, but we also talked about, the biomechanics of walking and things that you wouldn't necessarily classify as exercise per se. And luckily, there's more and more research coming out, and I think the field is expanding outside of just sports, because I think a lot of the research and what we would do in school too of, let's study, let's stand on a force plate while we do a weighted back squat and, things like that. And let's look at soccer players and let's look at, stuff like that. Which is all really important and really cool. And there's also a whole probably bigger population of people who are not in a specific sport or who are not in a sport that is studied. I did not read any studies about pole dancing. I did not read any studies about, the closest I came was looking at ankle sprains in gymnasts. That was kind of the closest I got to that. But yeah, it's a big topic. We dive into the microbiology of the actual muscle fibers. But then we also kind of go big and, there's nutritional aspects, there's, psychological aspects as well. There's just like kind of so much that goes into it. And as you can imagine, like humans are very complicated and it's hard to study just one thing in a box. You kind of have to, look at the whole picture. Yeah, I was very lucky to be able to study that. And I got to learn from physical therapists and athletic trainers and professors and, all that stuff. And honestly, I think that's a field that even if you are not planning on becoming a personal trainer or a physical therapist, even if you don't do a specific sport, everyone can benefit from learning about our bodies, because they're our bodies. And I feel like a lot of people, probably know more about their computers or their cars than they do about their own physiology, and it can be really helpful. So
yeah, I think that, especially after we sort of age out of school, the spaces where we are encouraged to explore physicality and movement just sort of peter away, right? It's something that you have to actively seek out as an adult to be able to make space and time to do. And I think for a lot of people, it can really feel like a chore, which I don't know. I think that's one of the things that draws people to pole dance, is that it is fun. It is enjoyable to do.
Yes, exactly. Because I can tell you that some of the studies we did were not enjoyable as a test subject. If I could have, been dancing instead of on a stationary bike, that would have been much more enjoyable.
Especially like those fan ones that, they're great. They get your heart rate up, but at what cost?
Yes. We were doing VO2 max test, which is kind of measuring your cardiovascular capacity, right? Mm-hmm. And traditionally that's done on a treadmill, but for some reason our professor was like, let's try different. You can do it on any sort of machine. And this one student, she chose a hand bike. Oh. So not even a rowing machine that gets your legs in there. She just chose a hand bike. And poor thing, she was so miserable that whole time of just like, go. Dancing would have been much more fun.
Yes, I think for most folks. And something that is, the science part in exercise science is more real than, say, the science part in computer science, which in general is not actually a scientific discipline. And you mentioned, right, doing studies, seeing what works. I have a behavioral science and social science background, so that's something that I've done a lot professionally. Thank you. And one of the things is that you may have a hypothesis about something that will work, perhaps something that is venerable and has been passed down to you through tradition. But when you examine it and when you look at it in a controlled situation, perhaps it does not actually work, right? So that's the benefit of this field for us as movers and, me and you as instructors, is that we can have a better idea of like, oh yeah, so this thing that, we used to think was so great and so good for you, now that we have more information and now that we have more structured information and we've investigated it in a more controlled way, we can be like, actually, maybe we shouldn't do that. Maybe that was a bad idea. So do you want to talk about some examples of things like that, where maybe, if the last time you had formal physical education was in grade school, and perhaps that was quite a while ago, some things that you might have learned about that we wouldn't recommend anymore?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I see this all the time in my clients. And I think one of the biggest ones that would definitely apply, to dancers is this idea that you have to stretch before you do, like, stretching should be a part of your warm up, but that it's static stretching, and that static stretching is the only type of stretching. And, when you actually look at the science, you can see that static stretching before doing some sort of strength work decreases the ability of your muscle to produce force. And so, we learned this in school, and I brought up the question, okay, what about gymnasts or dancers? We need flexibility. How does that apply to us? I get that like, okay, that's pretty cut and dry. If you are a bodybuilder or, you're training in the gym, like, okay, don't static stretch before you do your workout. And, that's where dynamic stretching comes in. That's where active stretching comes in. You can still work your flexibility without just passively holding a stretch. And it makes sense intuitively as well that you're about to do movement. So why would you prepare for that movement by sitting still? Even if it is, putting your body in a different position than just sitting. But that's the biggest thing, is like, static stretching is not going to get your muscles warm. No. It's not going to prepare you for the movement. And it can actually, it said they tell you to do it because it decreases your likelihood of injury, but it doesn't. It actually, if you think about like a rubber band or something that you hold it stretched and then you're like, okay, now be springy. It's not going to do it. And you can really injure yourself. So that's probably one of the biggest, kind of myths that's still floating around.
There was a really wonderful study in, I want to say, the Australian National Ballet, where they had a little like inclined piece of wood in all the studios for the dancers to put their foot on and then stretch out their, the back of the leg, lower leg. And they found, observational public health style, removing those blocks of wood so dancers couldn't do that dramatically reduced the amount of calf and ankle injuries, because students weren't really, really stretching their feet and losing, the elasticity. And in particular, it reduces strength and power to be hanging out in that position. Two things that you need if you're going to be leaping about on your feet.
Yeah, pretty foundational to ballet.
Yes, very foundational. Same with pole dance, right? If you're going to be putting on your heels, do not hang out in some static foot stretches first. I also see this a lot with gymnasts, actually, which surprises me, because I think in gymnastics, I don't know, gymnastics feels like a field where there should be more application of exercise science. For those of you who are just listening, Rachel's making a face.
It is like, and I can tell you what our warm-up was. It was 2 minutes hanging out in the splits of all directions, and then getting up and be like, okay, now leap. And luckily our coach started getting away from that, and he did have us, we had TheraBands, and it became, okay, now we do leg raises and we had ankle weights and stuff like that, and that started to become our warm-up. But it was definitely clear to me that this is the warm-up that everyone does. This is the warm-up that has just been passed down. And so that's why we do it. Just do it because we've always done it.
Very much the tradition approach, which is often presented in opposition to the evidence-based approach, which I think, you need a little bit from both, I think. But certainly if there's really strong evidence that you shouldn't be doing something that people have done traditionally, Oh, my internet connection is unstable. Thanks. I am a scientist by training, and if there is a lot of convergent evidence about something, I am likely to change my behavior because of it. Oh no, you've frozen. Well, I'm gonna assume you can still hear me. Oh, okay, you've unfrozen. Fabulous. And keep talking. So we talked about, what exercise science is, that there's a lot of things that we've gained more information about, recently, that it's becoming a more and more active field. So we're learning more and more and sort of adjusting our understanding as professionals of what is and isn't a good idea to do in an exercise or a dance. In our case, pole dance, right? In a pole dance setting. Even though there's not a whole lot of research on pole dancers. I think there's Joanne, last name, I'll put it in the show notes, remind me if I don't. There's, I think, pretty much one researcher whose focus is on pole dancers. There's a couple different people working on aerialists, but there's just not a lot of work on it. But that doesn't mean that like work on movement and exercise in general isn't applicable to pole dance. So something that folks may not realize is that when we talk about fitness, a lot of times people conflate fitness and being physically thin. And I think that it's very important that, as professionals, we inform you that your physical thinness has nothing to do with your level of fitness, and that there are measurable aspects of fitness that as personal trainers, we, evaluate, and depending on your goals, will help you reach, right? So for me, I teach, we're recording this on Thursday. I teach them every Thursday. I teach a conditioning class, which is focused on building strength. And then I teach a flexibility class, which is focused on building range of motion, not really flexibility. We don't do a whole lot of passive stuff in that class. And those are two aspects of fitness, right? Strength, can you move something heavy? Your body being a something heavy in the pole context. Flexibility, can your body be moved to a large range of motion, or active flexibility or range of motion? Can you move your body in a large range of motion? But do you want to talk about some other aspects and And we don't need to get super deep into like how you target them specifically. I mean, if you've got questions, you can book either of us, right? We are personal trainers, happy to talk about to you about specific goals. But what else is there, right? You know, strength, I want to be strong. Flexible, I want to be flexible. That's it, right?
I mean, there's so much more we can measure for sure. And you're completely right that it depends on your goals of like what fitness is, right? Fitness is our ability to adapt to our environment. And so we are choosing what our environment is. So strength, flexibility, you have power, right? Which is kind of your ability to like spring, I suppose. You have your endurance, right? Your ability to kind of have strength over long periods of time, your ability to sustain whatever it is you're doing. You have cardiovascular fitness as well. We know it is cardio. So, you know, how much oxygen can your body metabolize, basically.
That VO2 you mentioned.
Yes, VO2 max. And what else? Those are kind of like the main things that are measured, I think, but you can also talk about balance, I would say, is a big one. And I would kind of argue too that proprioception and interoception are signs of fitness, right? Especially for dance, it's so important to be able to know where your body is in space, especially pole dance relative to a pole, right? Yeah. You don't want to be, you know, spinning into it and whacking your body against it, yes. You know?
And just for folks who may not be familiar with those terms, proprioception and interoception are senses that you have, like sight or hearing, where interoception is your ability to identify and feel sensations from within your body, and proprioception is your ability to determine the position of your body in space, right? So if you close your eyes, you can still clap, and that's because of your proprioception. I probably shouldn't have clapped into the mic, but you can try it if you like.
Yeah. And that, those are really important aspects, especially as it relates to injury too. Mm-hmm. When I was kind of studying ankle sprains in gymnasts, like I mentioned before, it was kind of like, why they were asking the question, why do gymnasts get repeat ankle sprains when we know that they are training their strength and they're training their flexibility all the time? Why are they continually getting injured? And it's because their proprioception, they didn't train their proprioception back up the way that they needed to. And so their ability to, when they were landing, to tell where their ankle was, you know, that was the main thing. It wasn't the strength of their ankle. It wasn't the flexibility. It was that they weren't able to tell as well after an injury where they were in space. So that's, you know, a really important thing to train as well.
Yeah. And in the pole context, this is part of the reason why newer polers get more bruises, is because you just don't have as good of a sense of, this is where the pole is in space. This is how much force I need to get my body to the pole and no more. And this is something that you can learn, right? So you can learn the sense and then also the motor learning, right? The ability to move your body in the specific way you need to move it to be, you know, only enough energy to meet your goals, right? And usually what's happening in pole is students are, you know, they're new to the apparatus. They don't have that fine-grained proprioception. They don't really have a good understanding of the motor programs. So instead of going like, I'm going to take my leg to the pole, they're probably thinking, no one has researched this. This is based on my own, you know, understanding of motor learning. They're probably thinking, I'm going to move my leg until it hits the pole, right? So you're giving it more force than it needs to. Yeah, we are, those of you who are listening, we're both doing stuff with our hands, showing sort of degrees of freedom. But yeah, so, and then as you become more and more aware in pole, so like the gymnasts rather, who are building their proprioception, probably saw, you know, that's what helps them reduce the rate of re-injury in the ankles. Also, it helps you reduce the amount of pole kisses you get.
Yeah. And all of these measures of fitness, like you mentioned, it's all stuff we can learn. Mm-hmm. You know, it's all stuff that we can train and that we know enough, I would say, to be able to put together kind of a systematic, okay, step by step, this is how you're going to get better endurance. This is how you're going to get better proprioception, all of that stuff. So even if you're listening and you're like, oh, I don't have any of that, you know, it's okay, because, you know, we we know how to get you more fit in whatever area that you want to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like if any of you play role-playing games, you can think of fitness as a stat block, right? And you have each of the stats can be increased separately, right? So you can build strength and flexibility at the same time. That's kind of a myth that you can't. It's what I tend to find is that people who have limited time choose one or the other, and it's not that it is inherently more challenging to do them both at the same time. It just takes more time to do both at the same time. But you can increase each of those. And, something that I do, with as having a personal training background as a pole teacher is, each pole class, I'm like, okay, so we're building motor learning, the pole specific skills, but I'm also sneaking in a fitness component, right? So there's all of my on pole classes, there's a little bit of an endurance component that I always add in there just so that you can stay on the pole longer, right? I don't do a whole ton of cardio. Pole isn't the best for cardio, certainly not the way that I teach it, but you'll get a little bit. Any bit helps. And obviously the strength and flexibility classes have their own fitness focus as well. Yeah, so speaking of, sort of traditional exercise science stuff, something else that I find can often be missing in the pole world, and I think when this goes out, I will have also talked about this in the most recent episode, is periodization. So this is a word that I had not heard, and I should say, I'd been pole training, I'd also been weightlifting, right? Like I'd been working with a personal trainer, and honestly got a little bit frustrated because they were having a very difficult time understanding my sport-specific needs. Which is part of the reason why I became a personal trainer, because I was like, I can do this better.
Yes.
Yes. But what the heck is periodization? Why is it important? And how can you, if you're just a pole dancer and you're taking classes and it's not something that your coach is necessarily thinking about, hopefully it is. It's something I think about. But if it's not, how can you do it for yourself if it's this thing that's important that nobody talks about?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think like the myth or whatever that is closest to this, I think that is this idea that you have to like confuse your muscles to like get results or something. And that's like close, I guess. But it's kind of this idea that, yeah, if you do the exact same thing over and over and over again, you will get really good at doing just that exact thing. And if you don't add any more, once your body has adapted to whatever that is, that's just where you're going to stay. If you've always done 10 squats, maybe you get better endurance, I suppose, from doing it every day, but that's not going to translate to when you want to do, 10 squats with 50 pounds on your back or something like that. So periodization is kind of taking your body's adaptations into account, and this idea that, okay, it takes X amount of time to build strength. So we're going to have this, like workout or specific routine for X amount of time. And then once you've completed that, then we're going to change it. And you can do that based on what your goals are. So if someone is, just wanting to work on strength, then a periodization might look like, okay, we have this kind of base level for, 3-4 weeks or something. And then we increase everything. And then sometimes a decrease is involved because we need to allow our body to rest. And so you might have heard the term deloading or sometimes detraining. And this idea that you're still giving your muscles input, you're not taking a full rest, like you're not just being immobile for a week or two, but you're backing off the challenge so that your body has the space to really repair itself and to make all the adaptations that you've been giving it, and then you kind of ramp back up again. And you can do periodization based on different goals as well, kind of combining things. So instead of just having the strength aspect, you can kind of have the strength and endurance at the same time, or the strength and the flexibility, and just kind of, basically it helps you avoid those plateaus and those frustrating moments of you're like, I've been working so hard and nothing, it's staying the same. And yeah, depending on what your goal is, there's a lot of research out there of like, even specific like sets and reps and percent of 1 rep max and all of that stuff. But that's going to vary obviously depending on your goals and all of that.
So thinking about this, as pole students, something that if you want to do, right, if you have a specific area that you're like, I really want to make more progress on this, you can increase intensity. So when an instructor is like, hey, here are your options, you can pick the one that feels a little bit more challenging. You can increase frequency, so you can add in classes. A little bit hard to increase duration in class, but a big one there is move more slowly, right? So if you're like, I really want a beautiful invert, that's my main goal, I want it to feel so slow and effortless and beautiful and floaty. When you are inverting, go as slow as you possibly can, and then come out of it nice and slow as well. So you're increasing the amount of time that your muscles are like, I'm working so hard. Oh, look at me go.
And that's like, yeah, time under tension. That's exactly like, and yeah, like you said, you can do that by kind of mixing, having various levels of things of intensity, frequency, and slowing things down is a big, I love doing that because I'm a big proponent of control, it's like, and I would rather do 5 slow controlled reps too, and just really focus and then just kind of be like,
And the other thing is, if you're doing things too quickly, you're actually robbing yourself of the strength component of it. I mean, if that's your goal, right? If your goal is to like really build agility and like, I'm doing rushing exotic, fast, and that's what I want, ignore this. But if that's not your goal and you're looking for like a slow, strong, slinky style, if you go too fast, right, you get the sort of the rebound, particularly if you're doing something of the floor. And, it's not muscular, right? Basically is what I'm trying to go to. I don't want to get too into the mechanics, but you are no longer getting as much juice out of your strength work as you can. You're more into plyometric territory.
Yeah. And that's like another reason I think it's so important for everyone to have kind of a base understanding, because I think, if you want to, you can choose to really take advantage of momentum if that is what you want to do. But we can run into issues when you have a goal over here, but you're doing something that's over here. And then you're wondering, why are these not connecting? And it's like, I kind of have that mentality with form for certain things, like a squat specifically. It's like we've been taught of the exact way that you should squat and the angle of your torso and like blah, blah, blah. And I think that's important to know. But if you want to do a squat a different way and it feels good in your body, that's fine, as long as you're choosing and you're aware of that and it's not hurting you and stuff like that. But it's kind of that choice aspect and that awareness that I think makes the biggest difference of like, is what I'm doing going to result in the goals that I have in mind,
Yeah. I think a great example for squatting and pole dancers in particular is that a lot of times the form instruction will be to keep your heels flat on the floor. But if you're training to squat really beautifully in like 10-inch heels, that's not the most helpful movement pattern. You want to be working on building the calf stability. So you may actually want to do it like straight up in half point and demi point.
Yeah, exactly. I'm
not saying go out and like, throw 100 on the barbell and do it on your calves up on tippy toe necessarily. But I'm saying, think about, and that's what I'm thinking about when I'm designing off pole exercises. Okay, what is your body doing on the pole? What are all the mechanics of this move? And what can we replicate off the pole in a less challenging way, or maybe in a more challenging way than it would be on the pole, so that you have the capacity growing so that you can just do more stuff. That's the point.
Increased capacity. That is like what I'm all about. That's why I'm so into mobility and stuff like that. It's like if you're not a dancer or something, you may have no intention of ever wanting to do the splits or something. But if your hips have the capacity to do that, like it just unlocks everything, because I don't know, maybe you slip on a banana and you accidentally go into a split. You want to be able to like, not get injured from that. So that's kind of my biggest piece is like, let's expand our circle. Let's make our world bigger, because then we can do whatever we want in it, instead of, coming up against these kind of roadblocks and being limited by what our body can do versus, maybe what our mind can get a handle of.
Yeah. And also thinking about, healthy aging, which for me is a big component of, certainly my fitness goals, and also what I have in mind for my students and folks I work with is I want you to feel great 60 years from now. And if you're not, continuously gently pushing against the outer bounds of your capacity, it's going to shrink, right? And you may wake up one morning and find out you can't turn your head all the way to the side anymore. If you're not doing that regularly, you may find out that you've lost range of motion in your spine that you just sort of assumed that you still had, but didn't work into. So beyond just like, I want to be the buffest pole dancer ever, this sort of like gently, just pushing at the edges of the balloon really sets you up better than not doing it for, healthy lifelong movement.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes people say, oh, we have to like fight against our bodies because our bodies are, I like to think of it, our bodies are just, really trying to be efficient, and they're really going to prune out the things that they think we don't need. And so if you mentioned with the spine, if you've stopped moving your spine, your body just thinks, oh, we don't have to move it this way, so I'm just going to prune that out. We don't need that. Why would I waste energy keeping that motion around, And so that's kind of your body's like, it just wants to make things more efficient. And so, yeah, you do have to keep telling it and pushing up against and challenging and say, no, I don't want you to prune this out. I want you to keep this. Like, no, I need you to keep this. I need you to keep this. And yeah, movement is the way that we can tell our bodies that. Like, it's not enough to just be thinking like back bend, like you have to actually, do the neuromuscular work to keep that motion.
Yeah, it's also really good for your brain as well. I feel like right now we're just like selling movement as a great thing, but it is a great thing. And guess what? You can do it for free. You don't have to come work with either of us. Although, Rachel's great. I think I'm pretty good. You should if you're interested. It's good for you, and it should be fun. It should be not awful, right? So I think one last myth that I would love to talk about, because every time I hear it, it just makes me, yes, it makes me so upset that not only that this is something that people are hearing, but it's something that they're internalizing and taking with them into their movement journey and their lives. And that is no pain, no gain.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And it is so prevalent. It's like, it's built into even the workout things that you can buy that are like, you don't need a 30-minute workout. You can do it in 10 minutes. It's like, but the 10 minutes only counts if you're dying, like,
Yes.
And this idea, like, in PE of like, can't have water. Like everything is suffering, you know?
It's so punitive.
And it's like, no, it's like, there's a difference between challenge and, punishment, I guess. And your body knows the difference. And I think that if you're someone who has been, moving a lot, you get to know that difference. The good muscle burn, like it kind of, and that's uncomfortable, right? It's not like painless, I would say. But the difference between that and just when you're like, I can't go anymore. And we're so, it's that camp that everyone has decided we have to be in for things to be effective.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, if your stretching is hurting you, like if you think about it, what is your body going to do if you're in pain? It's going to recoil. It doesn't want you to be in pain. So it's telling you, don't stop doing this thing. And then it's going to make it harder for you to do that thing.
Yeah.
If you constantly are, stretching like your splits or something, and it's always painful, always painful, always painful, that's going to continue to be the case because, your muscles tighten up and your body doesn't want you to do that,
Yeah.
and you can absolutely effectively challenge your body. You can get more flexible, you can get stronger and have it be enjoyable and not have it be painful.
Yeah.
And because also it's like, it's not just the physical aspect of pain. Why would we continue to do something that's painful? It's like, okay, if you go to, a CrossFit class or something and it just hurts, and don't get me started on CrossFit, but it just hurts. Your brain is not going to be motivated to do that again.
Yeah.
And so then you're not only fighting against your physical body, you're fighting against your mental body, and it becomes this struggle. And I think that's why so many people would say that they hate exercise.
Yeah.
And they don't. Like, they just kind of hate the
way it's been pushed on them and framed. Yeah. It's
right.
Something I think about is your body is not your prison. It is your home, right? And it's not.
Yeah. I love, like, the home is where the heart is, literally. Like, it's just like, and you want to take care of it, and it's going to take care of you. And it's this symbiotic relationship, and you don't have to fight against it. And like, I can tell you the difference of, like, in gymnastics, I used to fight to get into the middle splits. I would just push. I would feel like my bones were breaking. Like, it was not good. And I knew it wasn't good, but that was just, I don't know, that's what we did. And so now, middle splits is still a goal of mine. And I am so much closer now because I've been gentle, and I've, instead of pushing, I'm like coaxing, and it's an understanding kind of the relationship between strength and flexibility, and between the nervous system and flexibility and all of that stuff. And not only that, it's like, if you ask me, do you want to work on middle splits? I'd be like, yeah. Instead of in gymnastics, it'd be like, oh, no. Oh no. Middle splits time. Oh no. Like, so it's
gentle consistency is always going to get you better results than high intensity.
Absolutely. Yeah. When they say consistency is key, they're not lying. Absolutely true. Yeah, they're not lying. And consistency doesn't have to be 100% perfect all the time,
In fact, it shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be. Exactly. Yeah. And you've helped coach me through, kind of overtraining and stuff like that, because that's still a piece that is still lingering of like fitness culture and all that stuff of just go, and taking a break. Like, when you said to me, like, when was the last time you took a break? I was like, oh, like when I'm sick? And you're like, no. Not when your body is forcing you to take a break. When did you take a break? And it's like, yeah, because it gets in your head of like, you have to be doing this all the time. You have to.
Or that only some movement counts as exercise, right? This is something I run into a lot. So like, pole dancers who have, let's say, a very active job, and they're like, well, I took a pole rest day. I was like, okay. But you still, walked dogs for 5 miles, right? You still did a lot of movement. It all comes from the same budget. It comes from the same bucket. So, and also in that bucket is just general life stress. The more stressed you are, the less physical capacity you have, period, right? So, if you're sick, if you're sleeping poorly, if you've had a major family change, if you've moved house recently, anything like that is just going to reduce your capacity for physical movement, for exercise. So important to keep in mind.
Yeah. Because it's this kind of, this line of where is, because everything is a stress to your body. If you kind of think of it, like exercise is a stress. Is it distress? Is it putting your body into distress, or is it eustress, as we've called it? Is it leading your body towards adaptation and and so I try not to be like good and bad, like, but it's kind of like, is this going to, is this serving me in the way that I want it to? And that's
also, for those of you who are listening, that is EUSTRESS, not just the letter U, if you want us to look it up and learn more.
Yes. But yeah, and what you said, it's all coming from the same bucket. So you can't just say, oh, well, I didn't exercise today,
but I did help a friend move.
Right. Yeah. And that all counts. And that's something I've really had to evaluate for myself, because especially when I used to work at a gym, all the personal trainers would, after their shift was over, they would do their own workout, or they would do it in between clients or whatever. And I felt like I had to do that too. And I never had the energy to do that. Rarely did I have the energy to do that. And I would get so down on myself. On the weekend I would, but I would get so down on myself for not, working out myself. I'd be like, oh, I'm not exercising. I'm such a fraud because I'm helping other people and I'm not doing it myself. I absolutely was doing it myself.
Yeah,
you know how many squats I did per day, demonstrating how to do a squat, or, handing weights to people, or setting up equipment, or putting the dumbbells, all of that stuff. It's like, okay, yeah, I wasn't doing 10 deadlifts in a row, like thinking that it was a deadlift, but what was my body doing when I was picking up these weights off the ground and putting them away? So that's a big thing that even, wherever you are on the movement spectrum, like it kind of can affect all of us of really pay attention to what movement are you doing throughout the day, because it all counts. Like if you have, I live in a townhome that has 3 flights of stairs. Like that's, that's a lot of moving, going from the garage all the way up to the bedroom or something, just so things like that.
Everything is exercise secretly.
Breathing. We're all doing it right now. We're all moving your ribs. You're using your intercostal muscles.
And your brain. Your brain uses a ton of energy. And on that note, so this has been a wonderful conversation. I could definitely keep going, but also I want this episode to be less than an hour. So where can folks find you? And you work as a personal trainer, so if people are interested in building fitness along one of the axes that we talked about, and I know you also do other things as well. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So you can find me at Mindful Movement and Living on Instagram, on TikTok. The link in bio has all the things. So yeah, I do a lot of I tend to work with a lot of dancers and ice skaters and things like that. But also, I love working with people who, have no movement experience, and what we just talked about of kind of everything is exercise. Like that's important to me. I grew up doing martial arts and gymnastics, and currently I'm a pole dancer and a ballroom dancer. So I love kind of taking aspects of all of those things and weaving them in. Even if you have no intention of ever dancing, you will definitely be doing some dance inspired things with me. But yeah, and I have a mobility certification. So like we talked about before, mobility is a huge piece and super important for longevity and just, feeling free in your life to do whatever it is that you want. And then I also kind of, work with a lot of the mind-body connection. We do, like mindfulness type stuff, like breath work and things like that too. I'm a very multi-hyphenate person, and I love to just combine all of it together.
Multifaceted. We all are, right? It's nice to embrace it. So,
yeah.
So look Rachel up on TikTok, on Instagram. I think you can also just use your search engine of choice and find more information. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I hope you found this educational and it's maybe changed your perspective on exercise a little bit. And I will see you next time. Thanks so much for joining me today, pole dancer. This podcast is a production of Slink Through Strength, the inclusive, evidence-based online pole studio. So if you're looking for a place to train, either off-pole conditioning and flexibility, or learning pole tricks and refining your pole movement, you can find us online at slinkthroughstrength.com.